So the point of this video is, if you want something really, really badly, like so desperately that you would do just about anything to get it, and you just keep your eye on that prize and just go for it, you can do just about anything. I'm gonna start by saying, I know this video is going to sound like me bragging a lot about my accomplishments, and it's going to sound like me, I did this and that. But that's not the point of it. The point of it is to inspire you and let you know that if you put your mind on something and you desire it so bad, you can do it. Because that's what I did, at least in this one case. So what was it that I really wanted bad? I wanted a big, open, beautiful, sunny backyard. No trees, rolling lawn. I wanted that more than anything. I wanted that my whole life. Like, that's what I wanted for my house. What did I have? I had a nice house on 11 acres of like very dense forest with a lot of rock outcroppings and ledge and very shaded, dark, a lot of bugs and everything else. I did not have my big beautiful yard, but I was able to get it, and so that's what this video is about. So let me give you a little of the backstory. The story starts when our kids were about, I would say, 2.5, 3 years old. We were living in a nice town, suburb of Boston, but we wanted to move further out into the country. We wanted to buy the house that we were going to raise our kids in. So we moved to Harvard, Mass. Very, very rural town, very pretty. Central Mass. Woods and apple orchards everywhere and everything else. And the house we ended up buying was the house my wife really wanted. It's a nice house. It's good size. It was built in about 1997 or so. So it was pretty new. It was, she loved it, and I was fine with the house itself. But I said to her, I don't like the yard. I'd rather just hold out for something that had a nice big open. I love sun. I could be happy living in Kansas on a farm. I need a lot of light and sun and open. I like to see out. I like to see the horizon if I can. And this house was just like, it was woods, but it wasn't just woods. Like, you could see through the woods. The trees were so dense, you couldn't see 10 feet into the woods. And the woods, surrounded the house, and there was just big, huge granite ledge and outcroppings like everywhere. So it was not a big yard. It had a little tiny backyard with a chain link fence around it with some gardening on the inside of the fence. So, so I said to my wife, look, I know you love the house, so this is what we'll do. We'll buy the house, but once I get some money in the bank, the first thing we're going to do is, we're going to clear a big portion of the backyard, because I want a big open backyard. She's like, oh yeah, okay. So anyway, that was 2009. 2010, I got laid off. I was out of work for a year. I got a few kind of interim jobs. Finally got a regular job. I think it was 2012. Decent job, but I wasn't gonna become a millionaire. It paid the bills, and the years kind of went on, and I never made that big pot of money where I can do my project. So I think it was around 2014, 2015. I'm like, well, I got to do something. I got to start doing something. So I had a chainsaw. So I thought I'll cut at least some of the small trees, cut some of the limbs, open things up a little. I got to do something. And I spent the day with this chainsaw, got nowhere. I think, and I'm not a real handy person. I have to say, I think I almost got killed. A couple limbs, scraped the side of my head. I think if they were 3 inches over, it would have knocked me out. And I was like, this is not working. Because the truth is, by the end of the day, I was so tired. I wasn't being safe with the chainsaw, and I was like, okay, this is not good. So I talked to the guy that did my landscaping. His name is Juan. Awesome landscaper. And I said, hey, Juan, how much would it cost to start cutting down some of the trees? And he said, well, what do you want? Like, where, how much? And I showed him like, well, how about starting out here? I showed him a little portion of our backyard. And I said, what about all the trees in this? Maybe it was like an eighth of an acre, kind of to the side of what we had as our little backyard. He said, I could do that for 2,000. I'm like, really? I'm like, okay, just yeah, cut them down. And so it was a big, it was a good chunk of land. So I asked him to do that. The day he was doing it, I got a call from my wife. I was at work, and she was like hysterical. She was like, oh my God, Juan cut down the trees. It looked like a bomb went off in our backyard. It looks awful. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, what? And she's like, it just looks terrible. There's just like trunks everywhere. There's just like sawdust everywhere. It just doesn't look good. I'm like, all right, and she's like, Coco, our daughter, she's crying and she thinks it looks terrible. You ruined our yard. So I come home and I look, and it's like, the trees were down. It was like the beginning of maybe a project, and I thought it looked awesome. I was like, no, you can see the sky. What are you talking about? And she's like, it looks terrible, whatever. So my kids were miserable, crying and yelling, and you ruined our yard. So I said, all right, okay, we got phase one done. I'll fix it at some point. I'll fix it. But the money didn't roll in. So months went by. I think a year went by, and Catherine was like, you got to fix that. We got to do something here. It looks terrible. You got to get rid of all that stuff. We got to somehow put something in a garden or something. And I was like, all right, let me just scope it out for. I'm going to do the project. At that point, I think we had like 50,000 in the bank. Nothing else saved, but we were making ends meet. And I had this chunk of money. I'm like, well, let me just see if I can actually get the project done that I want to get done for 50 grand. So that's what I kind of set my mind on. So I wasted no time and started, calling around to friends to see, and I didn't even know who to hire. I mean, I knew I had to hire somebody like a general contractor, somebody who could look at the whole scope of the project. And I'm talking about, clearing 2 acres and putting lawn in and getting rid of all the rock and everything else. So I don't know who to call. So I think I got the name of a landscape designer who's really highly recommended. She lived in Concord, or she worked in Concord, really high-end community. And I thought, oh, she's probably going to be great. I brought her up. I told her everything I wanted to do. And it was like, she looked like she was having a panic attack. She didn't even know, she said, I don't even know where to start. I don't know what it would cost. She was just the wrong person. Like I need somebody in construction. She was, she could plant little gardens and figure out what bushes and trees and flowers and everything. But I just thought, a landscape designer would, sort of have subcontractors that can do this sort of thing. The scope was just too big for her. So then I just started reaching out to excavation contractors who had sort of like a GC vibe in their advertising. So I started to bring them in. They would come on the property. It was very, very kind of depressing. It was just very disappointing, because I wasn't getting anybody who was excited about the work. Most of them didn't even want to touch it. I had one guy come in. He's like, you just can't do what you want to do. There's, with all the ledge and all the rocks and just the number of trees, I could probably do like a pathway, like one maybe leading from your back door, kind of like diagonally, kind of up that hill for maybe about 60 yards, and clear it and put some lawns. You'll have a straightaway, like maybe a little tiny mini par 3 hole on a golf course or something. But it would only be like maybe 20 yards wide, and I was just like, no, that's not what I want. And then another guy, remember, he came in, and he was kind of condescending, and I was telling him everything I wanted. I want the trees cleared. I want I want the ledge removed. I want lawn. I want it like sloping up. Blah blah blah. And as I was talking, he was almost like laughing. He was like, "Oh, really? Oh, you want that too? Oh, you want a lot." And he said something like, for what you got, in terms of your property, it would cost you more than the cost of your house. He said, your lot, in the business, we call that a bonus lot. The developer put in all of the houses, along the two main roads at the bottom of your driveway, and yours was kind of like way back. Built this quarter-mile driveway up, kind of way out and back. It was kind of a bonus. So, and I got what he was saying. He was saying, yours was like the throwaway lot. If it sells, if it, maybe it's just kind of extra. So don't waste your time on making it anything too great. And by that point, I was just getting so discouraged. But I got the name of a guy, Ben Polson, who's a excavator, kind of a general contractor. He came to the property, just really easygoing, kind of older guy, walked around, checked everything out. And he's like, I told him everything I wanted. And he was like, yeah, I could do this. Yeah, this is doable. And I told him kind of the rough budget, and he was like, well, it's going to be a little more than that, but yeah, this is definitely doable. And so we started to kind of go through the steps. He said, all right, first thing is, you're going to have to get all the trees cut down, because I told him I had somebody to do that. And then he said, the next thing is we got to deal with the stumps. And I said, yeah, I was thinking just grind those down, probably be the cheapest. And he's like, no, if you're going to get rid of stumps for a lawn, if you just want, empty lawn, just grass, you can't really grind the stumps because the root system is so big, and over the years it's just going to rot and disintegrate, and you're going to get these sinkholes all over your yard. So you're going to have to pull them. I'm like, all right, is that expensive? He's like, the pulling them isn't the expensive part. It's the hauling them away. Like trucking out all of those stumps is going to be really expensive. I said, all right, well, if that's what we got to do. And then he said, and then I've got a subcontractor that can, remove all of the stone. I'm like, so are we going to blast? He said, we can, but and that's a real tough process. He said, like 20 years ago, I would have told you to blast. Now, like all the regulations, you're going to have to get people to come in here, and there's notices, and you got to get this, town ordinances and everything else you got to comply with. He said, it's a real process. And he said, the other thing is, some of this ledge is kind of close to your house. So, when you're blasting close to the house, you could end up compromising your foundation. And I was like, all right, that doesn't sound good. I said, well, what's the other option? He said, well, we can get these like hammers and splitters in. It's just a long process. The cost would be about the same as the blasting, but you don't have to deal with all the regulations, but it's a longer process. I said, all right, well, let's do that. And then he said, and then I'll grade it. And then, we'll get the loam in and the grass seed and irrigation. I said, all right, let's get going. So the first step in the process was for me to I get like rolls of this yellow caution tape, and I circled out the entire perimeter of how much of the woods I wanted cleared. And I remember, I started out, kind of conservative, modest, and I'm like, you know what, if I'm going to do this, let me get my 2-acre backyard. And by the way, I'm going to show you, I'm going to walk around the backyard just so you could see the final product. My one regret, truly, was that I didn't video what it looked like before. And it was because it wasn't like, like I had in my mind that I'm going to do this massive project that's going to like kind of be like life-changing for me. I would love to have a before and after. It almost like evolved, But anyway, I decided, all right, I'm going to do the whole, I'm going to do it so that it is what I wanted. Like I'm not going to go like 90%. It's going to be 100% exactly what I wanted. So I marked it all out. I had Juan come in. He gave me quotes. Like the portion he had done for like the $2,000, there was maybe like, I think there were 3 more, and he gave me a deal. So it was like the 3 other sections, he cut into 3 sections, each 2,000. They were bigger than each of those were bigger than the original one. So it was a lot of trees. So he came in, cut down all the trees, and then Ben had the stumps pulled. We had those hauled away. It was just truckload after truckload, these giant stumps. And then we had Ben's subcontractor to come in and start removing the stone, and that was brutal. So there were 2 kinds of machines. There were hammers and splitters, and it was mainly the hammers. That was just these giant machines, and this was every day, all day. just banging, chipping away at this rock. It was bang, 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 all day long, day after day after day. And then he had like the splitters were like these giant drills for portions of it that just needed like just put like cracks or fissures in the stone so they can actually break it up into small pieces. And one of the things I wanted was, and I'll show you when we walk the backyard, sort of in the left-hand corner, it sloped down. And that was a big portion of the yard was going to slope down. So you wouldn't be able to see it from like the patio, from the back. Because it was going to, it was a big slope down. So I said to Ben, like, I really want that to slope up. He's like, all right, well, we'll take all that stone, we'll use it as fill. Obviously, you can't use anything organic like the tree stumps as fill. And then we'll bring in just kind of landfill, kind of cheap dirt and stuff just to fill the rest of it, which is what we did. And then while the splitters and the hammers were going on, they were moving that stone. That was I would say at least a month. I had Ben come in with like a backhoe, and some of the ledge sort of on the periphery of what was going to be the backyard, I wasn't going to remove that. That would have been just a waste of money because it would have been a huge additional amount of money. But it was also it didn't look bad, kind of, at the very outer edge of the yard. It didn't interfere with the yard. There's only one stone outcropping sort of in the middle of the yard, which wasn't too big. It was low, and I just used that as kind of a nice garden in the center. But so I had Ben come in with a backhoe and just all that ledge around the periphery, and I'll show it to you. There's a lot of it. Just scrape off all of the dirt and the small seedlings and the trees and the boulders and the rocks and everything else. But there was left on it there was still dirt in all the cracks and weeds and a lot of roots that the backhoe couldn't get. So that summer, when I was working a really busy job, I probably would get up at like 5 in the morning and do like maybe 2 hours of work, like on my hands and knees with, garden trowels and, just garden shovels and buckets, just scraping the dirt and pulling the roots. And some of these roots are embedded in these like fissures in the ledge. And it was day after day after day. It was weeks and weeks and weeks, but I wanted to clear all that ledge. And then I power washed the whole thing, all that beautiful granite around the side. So when the removal of the stone was done, and then I did all the work on the ledge. Then that's when Ben came in and just did all the regrading, brought in the landfill to get that corner up, and then had it all like graded perfectly. And then the last 3 steps were he had to bring in basically loam to cover everything so that it was good dirt for it so you can go grass seed. And then we were going to have irrigation put in and hydro seeding. And I remember saying like, I know this is, I'm kind of at the limit of my budget, so I got to scrape together some money to get the rest of this done. I was hoping it wasn't going to be that much. I said, do we really have to do the irrigation, like putting a whole sprinkler system in this now massive lawn I've got? And he's like, yeah. He's like, because you removed every tree. There's no shade. It's going to be like the sun beating down. Without irrigation, you're not going to be able to go grow grass. I'm like, all right. So it's like, get the loan. Let's do the cost of the irrigation and the hydro seeding. And then, give me a quote on that. And I was scared to death of what he was going to say. And I remember I was at my son's baseball game, and they somehow co-opted me to run the clock. Now, I've run the clock at basketball games, which is not that complicated. I've done that for a long time. But running the clock with all the different parameters for a baseball game, I'd never done it before. And I was like completely stressed out. And my phone rang, and I saw it was Ben Paulson. He was going to give me the quote. And I was just like, oh, God, here it comes. I was hoping it'd be maybe, 10, 15 grand to get, 20 maybe to get all that done, those 3 things. And I'm like, Ben, I'm at my son's baseball game. I can only talk a second. He's like, all right, let me just give you the quote, and then we can talk about it later. And I'm like, all right. And he said, it's going to be all 3, the getting the loam trucked in and grading that, the irrigation system, and the hydro seeding for the grass seed. It's going to be $50,000. And I was just like, and by that point, I had already spent not just the $50,000 I had in the bank, But I needed, it already cost 100,000 total. So I was maxing out my credit cards, paying for everything by credit card so I can use my paychecks to pay Ben and all the subcontractors. So I'd already spent 100,000, maxed out all my credit cards, and I'm in state of panic mode because I'm at this baseball game trying to figure out how to use this stupid clock, and Ben quotes me another 50,000, and I had zero money. And I said, hey Ben, okay, good, I'll talk to you later. I just had to get off the phone. I had not think about it. So, the next few days I was just agonizing. Like, I had no money. And I remember I called our bank to get like a second mortgage on our house. And, when you have no cash in the bank, they're not going to give you a loan. They denied me a HELOC. And I was just like, there was no way I was going to borrow money from like my parents were elderly at that point. My sister or my friends, I just wouldn't do that. So I'm like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Like, I got to finish this job now. And I would just agonize over it. And one night, it was literally like the middle of the night, I was just thinking like, where am I going to get $50,000? And I remember it's just like something popped in my head that my paralegal at work said something about a loan against her 401k that she had. It was like, and I don't know what made me think of that. It was like, 401k loan. I wonder if I could borrow against my 401k. So the next morning, I called up the 401k, I think it was Morgan Stanley, whoever administered our 401k plan. I called up, I said, can I borrow against my 401k? And they're like, yeah, you could take a loan out, but you can't. And I think I had maybe like 100,000 in my 401k account. I'm like, all right. But they said, but you can't borrow the full amount. There's a cap on how much you can borrow. And I was like, well, what's the cap? And they said, it's $50,000. I was like, whoa. I was so psyched. I was like, yes. So I was like, I'll take the whole 50. So, got the money, got the job done, finished it up. And, I know it sounds kind of extravagant, for me, like almost like a big spoiled brat. Like, I want my backyard. But for me, it was about, like a mindset thing. And I gotta say at this point, like I was in massive debt at that point, but it was so important for me, I need light, just for my mood, just for, having a positive outlook on life. And I always just wanted a big, beautiful yard. I was like, I'm gonna do what I gotta do to get, like, that was what I wanted, in life. I wanted a house with a big backyard. And I gotta say, after that, it kind of worked out the way I had planned. It was like things started looking up. Things at work got better. I got promoted, made good money, paid off all the debt, and I got my yard. So I'm going to show you just so you can see like the finished product. Again, I wish I had a before picture, but I'll show you kind of what it looks like now. So this is my backyard, as you can see. And we'll do a panoramic view of the yard in a minute, but I just want to show you. So that whole corner over there was what I was describing. Like, that all went downhill. You couldn't see that before. So that's all like landfill and the ledge that we put there, and they built that up. So anyway, why don't we do a quick 360 so you can see the whole thing. All right, so I'll start with here. So none of these gardens were here. This garden I devoted to my wife and asked her what she wanted, what colors, whatever. So everything in here has to be either, white, pink, not hot pink. It's got to be like a pastel pink, or like some kind of very neutrally like purple, like the lilacs. So she's very upset that I put red roses in here. But all the rose bushes I put in here that were white, pink, they all died. And so I'm not like a skilled gardener. So all these gardens were 100% planned by me. I didn't have a landscape designer, but it was all trial and error. So these are maybe like the 7th or 8th round of plants that like actually survive here. So it was a lot of buying plants, planting plants, dying, replacing them. So it's been a real project. And I really don't have help. I have one guy who helps me. He's actually my stonemason who helps me a little bit on the weekends. And now my son Christopher is starting to help me too, for money. Doesn't do it for free. All right, so this is my wife's garden. You'll see you've got the hydrangeas are like the sort of the cornerstone, the big white flowers there. And then, so you'll see, as I was mentioning, the granite outcroppings around the periphery. That's what none of that was there. It was, well, it was there, it was just covered with dirt and trees and roots and everything else. So I cleared all that. The one I left in the lawn itself is this little outcropping of granite, you'll see, which we left and we made into a garden. This garden was my daughter Coco's garden, and got some inspiration for some of the plants here. Originally thought she was going to actually do the gardening. That didn't turn out as I hoped, but anyway, so she's inspired a lot of the plants here. But again, a lot of these are like the fourth round of plants that made it actually survive the winter. In this garden, so what one of the real challenges is, so we have deer everywhere. Like sometimes there's 10 deer in our backyard, and for some reason they love this garden. So these are plants that deer won't go near. And again, just I've learned over the years which ones they won't touch. And then you'll see there's some, lilies, irises all along the edge. That tree over there is a magnolia. It's a magnolia. At some point, it's going to have beautiful yellow flowers, but that's been there for about 5 years, so it's got to mature a little more before it actually does that. And then, on that side again, none of those little rocks were there. Ben laid those in. I put some gardens in. There's forsythia, more irises. We have spirea everywhere because that's like the one thing that they survive everything. So this is the biggest outcrop. This I call it Big Rock. This, when I was doing all the cleaning up work and power washing, that took forever. That was killer. It was the middle of summer, so none of this was here before. This was all put in, and actually I put this in a few years after the project was done, little by little. We got a lot of Asian rhododendrons, some Rosa Sharon, a lot of lilies, more hydrangea, just all kinds of stuff. So this rhododendron was the one plant that was over there. And by the way, this rock was covered with woods and brush and everything else. So this little garden here, and we'll just take a little walk down just to see a little front yard. None of this was here except that rhododendron was here. And for some reason, it has something to do with the irrigation system. It just gets a lot of water. It's the best garden. Everything just grows prolifically. So it was 4th of July yesterday, so I bought a bunch of Montauk. These are daisy bushes. The lady I bought this from is like this militant gardener, and she was like, make sure you prune the Montauk daisies right at the 4th of July, and you got to cut like a third off of them. So every year, like the green is beautiful, but I basically cut it all off because otherwise they get too leggy. And I feel like, her words were so strident, I never miss it. So I got, Montauk daisy there, and there's like 3 over there as well. So anyway, like I said, this garden does amazingly well. This bush is like probably my favorite, and it's the most underrated. It's called Daphne. And in the garden store, it doesn't look like much. This started out as one little leggy little kind of puny bush. And look what it grew into. And we got a lot of ground cover. Anyway, come on down. This I got to prune. I got to get rid of all this, clear the stairs. This was like the giant Montauk day. So I got to cut this practically in half. Cut it way back. And then, most of the front yard, like from like that way was it's the way it was when I bought the house, or when my wife and I bought the house. This is all new. None of this rock. This was all covered. It was just a hill of dirt. So all these little trellises I put in, all this is new. And then around here, all of these lilacs and the vinca. All this is new. So anyway, that's my yard. So that's my backyard. It brings me so much joy. It really does. So the point of all this is, if there's something that you really want to accomplish, there's something you really need, or there's a goal you want to achieve, if you just put your mind to it and don't listen to the naysayers, the people who say, you're not going to be able to do that, or it's impossible, or why do you want to do that, or they roll their eyes, don't listen to them. There's just about nothing you can't achieve if you just go for it and don't quit. I did that one other time in my life. I used to read the Bible to our kids, like sort of the kiddie Bibles when they were really little, and I wanted a book that was really geared more toward teens and young adults when they got a little older, and there wasn't one available. So I wrote a book. I sort of rewrote the stories and teachings of the Bible. Became bestseller, award-winning book, and it was not easy because I had a full-time, job as a lawyer, but I got it all done. It was something that I was 100% committed to do. I felt like it was God's calling for my life. Got it done. So right now, I'm embarking on probably the third thing in my life that is like climbing Mount Everest, but I want more than anything. And that is to make this channel a success. And this truly is my calling from God. And I'm going to make it happen. And it's not that, I want to be famous or anything like that. It's that I want to reach a lot of people with the message. And the message of this channel is that, our Creator, God does exist. He sent His Son here to deliver His message for what He wants for our lives. And that is to devote our lives to His purpose for each and every one. There's a unique plan for each and every one of us. And that, in order to live our lives according to His will, we've got to be kind and loving and disciplined and forgiving. And just remember that, in the long run, our goal is to become better versions of ourselves, and then we'll have eternal life. And it's largely for people who, believe, the underlying message of Christianity, but have become very disillusioned by organized religion and just feel like a lot of what organized religion or sort of these people who are pushing Christianity or delivering is just a lot of BS. So they kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater, and they just turn their backs on God because they don't know where to turn. So that's what this channel is for. So if you like my videos and you are interested in that message, or even if just you feel like these are entertaining, please do. I'd love for you to be part of my community. Hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.